Hi, everybody. I'm with Peter and Charlotte, and we are having the SkyMind Book Launch on June 23rd. And people these days are looking for more flow in their lives, less force. Peter, Charlotte, what would you suggest that people actually practice
Mhm.
to discover this flow?
Mm.
Everyone is preoccupied with flow, and we trying to find that flow within ourselves. But really, what these teachings are saying, and Sky Mind really is suggesting, is that there's this vast resource, which is actually our true nature, which we have access to because it's us. And that if we let go of our preoccupations that keep pulling us out into the world and into our performance measurements and so forth, but we actually lean back, rest back into our self-arising nature, that's where the flow comes from. That gives tremendous agency and power, not power over, but power from within, self-arising power of the vast true nature of things. And if we lead, for example, as a leader from that place, that gives not only freedom to us, doesn't bring only flow to us, but it actually gives freedom to everyone we're working together with.
Mm. I think there can be an interesting irony, like Charlotta, am trying to get into the flow. The perspective here is there's no Charlotta. As long as Charlotta is looking to get into the flow, I'm going to keep running up against, guess who? Myself. So the
Constriction.
flow actually, I mean, the way Maciek Lebdrin from the 1,000 years ago said is rest, relax. But what she's saying in that, it's a profound relaxation, which means we actually relax into, open to our profound connectedness to all things. It actually does matter that we see, feel the sun on our faces, that we perceive the fine movement of the green leaves on the tree outside, because that releases this tightness around ourselves and we begin to feel that we are a part of the whole thing. And the whole thing is where we find flow, that connectedness. And finally, I'll say, I think there's an aspect of following our joy. What moves in you? What opens your heart? What is that joy? Because the joy is our connectedness to all things, which is the place from which flow arises as well.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's like the wave in the ocean. We are waves, but we are fundamentally part of the ocean. And so this is like identifying with resting in our oceanness and acting from that place. That brings flow in infinite abundance.
Mm. Beautiful. And both of you have got me wondering how you would define freedom, because you brought it up in this conversation that we've had. And what would Machik say about freedom?
If you look at this ocean of awareness, this nature of mind as our true nature, then actually the constriction of manifesting as a particular persona or personality or ego self within this dualistic world is the limitation of the absolute freedom that is our nature. And so freedom is slowly through the expression of this ego self, through the enjoyment of the ego self, and through getting to know ourselves, to slowly start liberating the self clinging and the grasping and the contraction that comes so easily with our manifestation in this world. Then we actually relax more and more into the freedom that is already our nature, which is total freedom.
Mm. One way that Machik talks about liberation is she equates it with fearlessness. Fearlessness. And it's not fearlessness in the sense of, oh my God, I'm so strong and I've got so much armor on that I'm not afraid of anything anymore. It's fearlessness because we recognize our capacity to meet anything and everything that arises on the path of our lives with a quality of curiosity and even intimacy, that rather trying to board up and secure the borders of our life and our identity, we actually bring curiosity and even kindness and compassion to the places where we do have fear, because we all have fear as human beings. But rather than turning away from those, we turn into and towards them, and we become curious about what they can teach us, which those places can always teach us something. And that's what fearlessness is. And that then is liberation.
The exact phrase that she uses, Maciej Labdrin uses there is fear. The measure of freedom is fearlessness. The measure of freedom is fearlessness.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. Thank you. So I want to hear from you too about your experience of writing the book. Why did you write this book? And by the way, for those listening, Pieter and Charlotte are also featured in the upcoming book, The Creative Moment, because I so admire both of them and their perspectives. And I really want to hear, why did you write this book? What prompted you to say we must write this book?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was really our own path of study and practice for many, many years in this lineage, this 1,000-year-old lineage of Maciej Labdrin's, and really which is held within the Buddhist lineage, which is 2,500 years old. So such a profound path, stream of deep practice of coming to know ourselves and our reality in this beautiful, magical thing we call life. And then coming across Maciej Labdrin's teachings, again, from 1,000 years ago. And in some ways, they're sort of tucked away in these volumes of many, many hundreds of pages. But there's so much wisdom there. And we just felt this inspiration. What would it be like to take her pith instructions? We call them rainbow arrows that point us to an understanding, a direct understanding of our true nature. What would it be like if we took some of these pith instructions and shared them more broadly and hopefully in much more accessible language that people can relate to in our world today and hopefully make use of in their own lives and in their communities and the work they do?
And for you, Pieter?
I think there are such amazing, profound systems of knowledge on the planet, but they sometimes it takes a lot to access them, a lot of dedication. You have to find it, and then you have to enter this complex mandala of the teachings. In this case, for example, the Vajrayana teachings, or the Tibetan Buddhist, known as Tibetan Buddhism. And there's such a rich world of teachings and skillful means and so forth. And and we have so many dear friends that live very conscious lives, but that are not accessing these teachings necessarily, or they, because they don't have those pathways established and haven't spent those years that we have to access these pathways and to learn these arcane practices and so forth. Sometimes arcane practices. And so there was also a desire to make this more accessible, and not by watering it down in any way. Hopefully, that was certainly not our intent, but just to bring it into a domain where it's more accessible, and where, if it really is our true nature, the ground of being that we are talking about, or that Tibetan Buddhism is pointing out, if it really is our true nature, then we should all have access to it. And we do have access to it. And just to point that out, to remind people, sort of, to me, I often say this, it's a somewhat obscure phrase, but what is really going on here? This is a very sophisticated articulation of my existential interest. But what is really going on here in life? What are we really doing? And we get so absorbed in the day-to-day, and we get preoccupied with so many things that, what I often say is, we are more preoccupied, vastly more preoccupied with the objects of perception than with that which is perceiving in the first place. And that which is perceiving that awareness, that is our basic cognition, is probably infinitely more interesting than the objects of perception. And so it's about just reminding people to turn back and look at what is this aspect that is cognizant, that is experiencing, that is aware in the first place. And how does that connect? How does that connect to the nature of things, which is really what this is about. So writing about that and inviting people to develop a curiosity about this, about themselves, and giving some practices that they can play with and work with in order to investigate this and to play with this. That was sort of the intention.
Beautiful. Thank you. I personally loved the book. And what I've so appreciated about learning from the two of you, and Charlotte is my Kalyana Mitra, which means spiritual friend, for those who may not be familiar with Buddhism. Walking the path with me is this ability she has to do exactly what Pieter just described and what she was describing before, which is when an obstacle arises, to use the mirror, literally like turn it around. And then to her point about the quote from Machig and Fearlessness is to turn it around. And then how do I use that, those, ungraspable rainbow arrows to then awaken something new in myself as a result of going into the pain, discomfort, fear, so that something new arises. So I'm really excited for more people to get their hands and hearts and heads into SkyMind, to your book, and also to both of your work. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
dear Catherine.
Thank you very much.